Welcome to Real Talk with Garrett and Laura. Today we are going over what can go wrong in a real estate transaction and the typical issues and a couple current examples and what we do as realtors to help you get them fixed and solved and smoothed over.
And obviously it makes the most sense for us to come on here and pretend like everything is always perfect with every transaction. But that's just not reality. And what matters is how it gets handled. So that's what we want to talk about today.
That's right. And we can handle it for you.
That's right. Okay, so here are a few examples of the back and forth that we go through. Some of these are not actual issues, but may start to feel like issues in the transaction. So the first example is stuff with the inspection and inspection negotiations. So often sellers can feel like their sale is falling apart upon inspection negotiations, but actually inspection negotiations are super normal and to be expected. We just have been in a market where that's not happening often. But again, inspection is a contingency. So it is also a way for the buyer to back out. So just things to be aware of in that whole situation across the board.
Yep. And from the realtor side, these are all things that we're advising our clients on to say, hey, just be ready that the home inspector is going to be giving you everything that could go wrong with the house or timelines on how much the water heater has left, how much the roof has left, different stuff like that. And so the home inspector's job is to tell you everything. Then our job is to weed through and say, okay, what are the 2, 3, or 4 things that would be likely to be negotiated for or just planned for our client. So it will feel overwhelming for a buyer to hear all the things that could go wrong, but it's our job to bubble up to the surface. What are the most important things? And just ways that make sure that then the buyer doesn't want to back out because they think there's an overwhelming amount of stuff to do.
Yeah. And honestly, knowledge is power. So the inspector is coming in so that you have all the information, but you might only need to fix one small thing actively. And the other
Right.
stuff is just good to know things over time, DIY projects, etc.
Exactly right. And another common hiccup that happens in the middle of the transaction is the appraisal. And there could be issue on the appraisal coming in low or financing issues, and especially now with the market hopefully getting to a more balanced market and a lower amount of appreciation year over year, is that appraisals could be coming in low. And so it's our job to either go back to the lender and or rework what can happen with the buyer's financing. But Laura, what have you seen as far as different strategies for reworking financing on a low appraisal?
Yeah, so it could be as simple as adjusting your down payment amount. And a lot of that just has to do with working with your lender, giving them calls, talking about your options. So there are a lot of things you can do. It's not just oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. Now I have to back out. And the reality is that like everybody here wants this to work. The seller, the buyer, the lender, everyone, your agents, we all want it to work in every scenario, whether it's inspection stuff, appraisal stuff, financing stuff. We all have the same goal in the long run.
Yeah.
So working through these issues and calling your lender and figuring out your options, usually with a low appraisal, it is as simple as adjusting your down payment. So just to have a little extra cash to cover that difference.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all on your side when these unexpected moments happen.
Yep. And so maybe you do go from a 10% of cash paid, towards the down payment of the purchase price, that turns into 5%, and then you come up with 20 grand towards low appraisal. But those are all things too that Laura and I talk through even up front in our what we call our buyer consultation, so that then people are comfortable and know this could be coming up down the road. That way, they're not hearing about it for the first time when we're 3 weeks into the transaction and a week before closing. So our job is always to let you know of what could happen ahead of time so that when and if it does unfortunately happen, we can work through the steps because we've seen it before and we've done it before and are happy to. So we don't want any of those unexpected moments to happen. And so it's our job to help get you through that.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like our role, because these things aren't new for us, but they're new for you, is really reassuring voice and shoulder and person, because in our role, it's an emotional process. It's a home. It's a big deal. And we've seen these things happen before. We've worked through them before. We've seen worse things happen. And we know how much anxiety there is when you're selling a home and when you're buying a home. So our job is to come in, handle the situation, and also talk you through it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. So
Yeah.
we care the most about hearing you and processing with you too. Okay, but
Here,
wait, Garrett, you have
hearing,
a really you have a really weird situation right now, and I want you to share about it. Not weird, unique,
right.
different. I want to hear about it.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. So here, yeah, hearing out your concerns and processing with you are the key things. And in my current situation for a listing I've got going right now, we were on the market for a couple weeks, got an offer, and then the new buyers were out of the country for 6 weeks, and so it was going to be it was going to be about a 2 month closing anyway, and we're set to close next week. So we are 2 weeks away from closing when my seller's attorney calls me and says, "Hey, we need all these things changed on the seller disclosure form, and the seller needs access to the property after closing because of stuff that they cut down some trees that the city of Normandy Parks gave them a slap on the wrist, and it shouldn't affect the new buyer, but it just left a really bad taste in the buyer's mouth that it wasn't disclosed up front. And even though we just heard back from the city that this was all needing to happen, and even though the seller is going to take care of it, the buyer ended up walking away a week before closing because they felt like, oh, these people are trying to get one over on me. But they had their way out to then get their earnest money back, cancel the deal.
Mhm.
My sellers feel like, hey, they took us off market for all of the summer and being off market for 2 months only to back out and get their earnest money back and go back on the market. But that's the current example of a deal that goes south in the middle of it, all because of non-disclosure and everything. But it's interesting too to then hear from all sides, hear from the other realtor, the attorney, and figure all that out too.
Well, that's so tough too because it has nothing to do with it's just the timing was bad and the seller just forgot to include something, maybe thought it wasn't a big deal. And then for it to be not that big of a deal mid-transaction ends up being a really big deal for a buyer. Because think about the buyer's perspective. Wait, what? I already signed the seller disclosure. I shouldn't have to sell a new one. What are you trying to, you know, get by me? And so it does make sense. I mean, lawyers being involved on both sides, it feels like a huge headache. But the reality is that, like, you can list again,
Yep.
actually disclose it, and then the next buyer has all the information. And so it's a lesson learned for your seller. It's a bummer that the buyer couldn't, process through that. And I'm sure their agent did their best to like reassure and help them understand, but it's so loaded and there's so much anxiety in those situations because it's a home and it's property and it's a really big deal. And if I remember correctly, that was pretty expensive property. So
Totally.
it's like,
Yeah. Well, and there's
yeah.
no doubt about that. It was a domino effect of a few little things where if you were taking them, one off, it's like, okay, that could work, or yeah, we can make that work. But it ended up just leaving the buyer and the buyer's realtor with a bad taste in their mouth, thinking that a
Yeah.
week before closing that then there's more stuff coming out about the property. On the selling side, it feels like that we have to sell the property twice,
Mhm.
but keeping the end goal in mind and really, reassuring the seller of, hey, the end goal was to get it sold for your price. Unfortunately, it's not going to work out with these people, but we'll get someone else in there. And that's kind of, the end goal in mind that we keep, when things do go wrong, of,
Mhm.
reminding our clients, hey, it's not about the little individual things. We'll have it all above board and get it dialed so that your end goal ends up happening.
Yeah. And it's an easy to explain situation to other potential buyers
Mhm.
because it was about trees being cut down and getting a slap on the wrist from Normandy Park, all these things. It wasn't on the
Oh
seller
yeah.
disclosure. So it's like, it's not like this huge, scary, why is this back on the market? It's an easy to explain situation. And for your seller, yeah, the goal is to get it sold, but it's also, an easy to explain situation for them. Like, hey, we forgot to include some stuff. This is our fault. Let's do it again. And
Right.
that's okay. The house is
Right.
going to get sold. They're going to get their end goal. And hopefully that buyer finds something else that's great that they're not scared of.
Yep, yep. So just another reminder, if things do go wrong in the
Mhm.
middle of a transaction, and it's
Yeah.
up to us as realtors to find that win-win and find that end goal in mind,
Yeah.
to help our clients sleep well at night and to be good all the way through, do our job.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Obviously, working with us is always perfect. But in case something unexpected happens, we are prepared for that too.
That's right. That's right. Yep. And we're on your side from the beginning to end, to make things turn out well for you, and that's why you hire us.
Exactly. Tune in next time. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye now.